Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the True Potential Do More With Your Money podcast. My name's Daniel Harrison, Chief Executive at True Potential. It's Thursday, the 7th of May, and I'm joined today by Jamie Sexton, by Peter Bowles, and making his debut on the podcast, but not his debut on the small True Potential screen, is Barney Hawkins. So welcome, Barney.
Thank you.
Yeah. We've got one ground rule on the podcast, which is no swearing, please, Barney.
I'll try and remember. It'll be difficult, but I'll try and remember.
Do your best, please. So really, ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of today, as I mentioned last Friday, was we're going to have a Q&A session, which we're trying to run once a month from you. We get a fair few thousand of you logging in and watching us every week, and a lot of questions and a lot of input from yourselves, which we really welcome, by the way. It shows that you're watching us. It shows also that you're getting input from it as well. So thank you very much for that. But before we get into the questions and answers, of which we've got probably about a dozen which we've picked for today, I'm going to hand across to Barney. Barney, for those who haven't met Barney before, works in the True Potential Investment Management team. He's one of the senior team within there. And Barney, would you mind giving us the normal weekly update, please?
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting time. Markets have staged a remarkable recovery. We're just looking at the end of April figures, and stock markets have had quite a good month in April. Bizarrely, it doesn't feel that way, especially against the backdrop of the economic numbers coming through. And the numbers that you see in the paper are they're just horrible. It's the worst time since 2008, or the worst time since the Second World War, the worst time since the Great Depression. Markets have moved on from that. They're looking through this. We may come on to it later, but this downturn has been, in some ways, it's similar to others, but in many ways it's very different to other downturns, and what we're seeing is that fund managers, markets, investors are disregarding the news that's coming out because it's just horrible, but they're looking through the first quarter, which is history, the first 3 months of the year. They're pretty sure that the second 3 months of the year to the end of June aren't going to be great. But they're looking to the second half of the year and the beginning of 2021. And what they're seeing is, this massive amount of stimulus that has been, if not already thrown at the markets, it's been promised to the markets. So we've had central banks, we've had governments around the world acting in tandem. So just as the shutdown was sort of coordinated and happened all at once, so the policy response has been coordinated and is happening globally all at once. And no one's entirely sure how it's going to work out. There's still an awful lot of uncertainty out there. But there is now a sense of the markets looking through the current difficulties of what might happen in the second quarter, but particularly the second half, and out to 2021. So April, wasn't a bad month, and the True Potential portfolios held up very well. I think, as everyone knows, there's an awful lot in there. Our great mantra is diversification, and that's what's seen us through the worst of this downturn. So if we look at April's figures, which have just come through, the defensive portfolio was up 2.5%. The balanced portfolio was up, I'll just check my numbers, up 5.5%. And the aggressive portfolio up 6.5%. Now there's all sorts in there. There's bonds, there's gold, there's silver, there's as well as US equities, European equities, Japanese equities, UK equities. But those figures, sort of 2.5 for defensive, 5.5 for balanced, 6.5 for aggressive, compare I think most people use as their anchor point the FTSE 100. It's what we see on the front of the paper. It's what we hear on the telly. Billions wiped off share prices. What's happened to the FTSE? Well, the FTSE was up 4.5%. So we've performed well relative to that index, which isn't representative of the portfolios, but it does give a sense of how we've performed. Year to date, yes, the numbers are horrible. You know, the FTSE is down, I think, nearly 21% to the end of April. Our balanced portfolio was down 10%. Now, no one likes a fall of 10%, but compared to a fall in the stock market of over 20%, you know, that's not a bad outturn, and it just speaks to the whole theme of diversification that is, you know, runs throughout the whole True Potential offering.
It does, Barney. I think you mentioned diversification twice there, and it's a common theme on this podcast. And I think it was interesting as well. You talked about, yes, the FTSE is kind of what people look at that gets the headlines or not, you know, because it didn't get any headlines last week when it tipped above 6,000. I know it went back down, but that just kind of whispered in, so to speak. But yeah, you're right. When you look at the True Potential approach, it's a lot more than just a tracker fund which follows the markets or not. You know, there's the mix of asset classes and the mix of geography which everything's invested in, I think, and that's why, you know, the balanced fund's more than held its own, for instance. And the reason we use the balanced fund, I guess, is it's our top seller. It's a top invested fund out there. Frog in my throat, sorry. We'll move across to questions, I think, now, because I think it gives us a good chance. And Barney, we've got some economic questions as well, but we'll give your voice a rest for a wee minute. We'll bring Jamie and Peter in, who are anxiously awaiting. And Peter, we'll probably kick off with yourself, if you don't mind, because the news is all about, you know, I think today, by law, the government have to review the latest lockdown restriction.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
What it means is that when they went into lockdown on the 23rd of March, they said they'd reviewed every 3 weeks. So effectively, this is the 3-week anniversary of the last time that was reviewed. So at 11:30 today, as we sit here, the full Cobra get together with the PM. They do a Zoom chat, and they'll go through the latest indications and the latest data that they've got, all with a view to, on Sunday, Boris Johnson setting out how he envisages the next few months playing out. So in terms of obviously lifting the lockdown, but very gradually. So today's the kind of decision, or looking at the data. There's a lot of speculation. You'll have seen some of it yourselves in the last day or two about what that could mean. The answer is very, very little and very, very light. So probably maybe some liftings of the sort of outdoor activity. So at the minute, you're allowed to have an hour outdoors a day. They'll probably lift that. You know, you'd be allowed to spend more time outdoors, more time in parks, that sort of stuff. But very, very minor. But it's the beginnings of a process that'll go on probably till October. So what you'll see today is that Cobra committee looking at the data, unless there's data that they hadn't foreseen, shows a very different picture to what they were expecting, then I anticipate that you will see. It's not going to be Boris tonight. It'll be Dominic Raab, I think, doing the 5 o'clock briefing. And that's also a bit of an indication, because it probably means that he wants to say tonight the situation is as it was, you know, creating the platform for the Prime Minister to come up on Sunday and say, I've got the good news, which is we're beginning to go into the next phase, which it'll be very, very long and drawn out, I assume. But that's what's going to happen. So we'll see what comes of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're getting trailered in the press at the moment that the stay in message is probably going to be scrapped.
Yeah,
as well, which is probably what you're hinting at there, Peter. And a few of the questions have been kind of, you know, first question was, you know, what's the difference between Thursday and Sunday, which we had from one of our attendees, which I think you've covered there. You know, so Cobra meet today,
yeah,
and Sunday the announcement. Maybe one for the three of you, Barney, Jamie, and Peter. We tend to hate to make predictions because you can always end up with egg on your face in a couple of days' time. But what do we think Boris is going to say or not on Sunday? Probably That's the first prediction. Well, maybe we start with you, Jamie. What one thing do you think he may say?
I think there's been a lot in the press about families not being together, Dan. And there's this talk of this bubble mentality where, as you can like choose your own bubble that you can sort of socialize with. And I have a feeling that might come in the next couple of weeks. And I think it's probably quite important. There's a lot of, I think I watch GMTV every morning on the bike behind us, which is an interesting show, watching Piers Morgan.
It's not even called GMTV anymore, Jimmy.
So that's how far behind I am. But it's interesting. I think we've had every type of doctor and every type of prediction on that show. And the psychologists were on yesterday. It's about having more family towns just as important for your health. Yeah. So I would expect you'd see something, because that's a good news story for Boris to give, where you can go and cuddle your family again. And I do envisage that will be something that comes out in the near future. Okay,
so the social bubble, as its name is, Jamie's prediction. Barney, any ideas?
I think it's a very difficult line they've got to tread. Obviously, everyone wants to get back to work. They want to get the economy back to work, but that's got to be balanced against the obvious risks of setting off a second wave, and that they're almost sort of damned whatever they do. If it all goes well, then they'll be criticised for not easing the restrictions earlier. If it sets off a sort of second wave, just as and the numbers are coming down, they'll be criticised for relaxing restrictions too early. So I think they're on a hiding to nothing whatever they do. I think they probably know that as well. But I think, yes, a gentle easing of restrictions, more or less, along the lines that the Irish government has suggested, with small groups of as Jamie says, sort of bubbles, sort of meeting outside. So Peter will be able to meet the sort of knitting circle in the park once again.
It's been a long time coming, Barney.
And then a sort of a gentle of easing restrictions. We've seen suggestions of garden centres and shops where the majority of the activity is outside will be opening up again, and I think we'll see that. And I'm not sure it'll extend as far as pubs with beer gardens, but we'll keep our fingers crossed.
We can't but hope, especially with this nice weather. It was looking out the window yesterday, we were in a board meeting, and I was thinking, this is beer garden weather.
Yeah. So I think it's a good time. I think it'd be a good time to get into the patio furniture business, because I think they probably will. They'll certainly open up beer gardens, and if you've got a field next to the pub, we'll shove a couple of heaters and a few chairs around there for people to congregate on before you ever get back inside the local pub, I would think. So I agree with all of that. I think that's exactly what they'll do. I think I've also heard that schools possibly around about the 1st of June, give or take, because you sort of need to open the schools to allow businesses to come back. Otherwise, you've got the same problem that you had sort of before the lockdown when the schools closed. What do parents do in terms of getting them back to work? So those two things, if you remember when we went into lockdown, I think the schools closed on that Friday, the 20th, and then it was followed on the Monday by the full thing. And I think you'll probably see a quite a close correlation between when schools open to when businesses are allowed to go back. But from a business point of view, Dan, there's a whole, I don't know whether you've seen, there was published this week or leaked this week, sort of advice to 7 different types of workplaces, from outdoors to haulage to office work. And I mean, there's a huge raft of things they're saying that businesses should be taking account of before you send people back. So, whoever specializes in health and safety is going to have a great time.
Yeah, no, the old HSE and the human resources departments are going to have a great time. I think it's, we'll not name the names, Jamie, but you've got an intern from a local university working fully paid for us. We're not like one of these companies who kind of gets interns in for free. So he's on his year's placement, I think, this chap. Yes. And the university, after about 4 weeks of lockdown, wrote to you and said, we've noticed you've got somebody on a placement. Have you conducted a full health and safety review of his workstation at home. You send it to me and you said, what should we do with this? And I said, delete it. I said, what a carry on. You know, the fact that, you know, a month has gone by, you know, before this university's even bothered to contact them. So if we had contacted the health and safety review and it'd be working like that, you know, hunched over and, you know, with dangerous liquids all around them by now, the damage would have been done over the weeks. But, you know, these are some weird things which I'm not sure how you can police them. And I think it's linked with another question which we do have, which is what's True Potential's plan for going back to office work? We've spent the last 2 or 3 weeks really trying to second guess what the government are going to do, which is a dangerous old game because you know,
they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know. I was going to be kinder than Peter. I was going to say in a fluid situation, which is a posh way of saying who knows what's going to happen. A fluid situation, things can change. But certainly when you look at, say, some of the steps we put in place to begin with, you know, way prior to lockdown, we were talking about removing communal areas. We created our Site 2, which was the physical kind of post area, and that was quarantined from the rest of the office. A huge increase in kind of hygiene in terms of, you know, washing hands, a hand sanitizer and everything. And now we look forward, and a couple of the steps we've been looking at is either, you know, continuing to work from home for the foreseeable. But the problem is, you know, how long is the foreseeable going to be? You know, you talk about June, Peter, you know, June the 1st, and I think you're right. I think they probably will look to unpick things in the same way that they put it together in the first place. They closed the schools, and then was it a week later they closed the pubs on the Friday night, and then the Monday night they closed the offices. I think it was something like that. Seems a long time ago, because it was a long time ago.
You got plenty of notice that time, didn't you, as well?
Plenty of notice. 8:30 at night. You know, I think I talked about it on a podcast before, where your heart sank when you saw Boris come and sit down at the table for that pre-recorded thing. You thought, this isn't good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you've probably got to get children back to school, and there's been some sort of hint of maybe that it'll be the older children going back to school, which is bad news for me because I have younger children. Peter, your children are about the same age. And Barney, how old are your children?
They're nearly 16 and nearly 18. So one was due to do O-levels, GCSEs in new money, and the other one was due to do A-levels. But effectively now, they've both broken up for the summer.
Yeah.
And so they're, you know, knocking around the house. So even when the schools go back, I don't think they're going to go back. So yeah,
they might go in the beer gardens.
Yeah.
Well, with any luck, yes.
It's interesting. Just looking down at some of this the sort of guidance that was part of these 7 documents I mentioned that were published in the week, and you know, some of the things. I mean, a lot of it, by the way, is as you say, stuff we were already doing. So employees who can't work from home can go in. Well, that's kind of already the situation. Yeah. Work from home if possible, already the situation. If you're you know, in a critical role that you need to be there, you can go in. All that's consistent. The new stuff is, you know, it's quite hard for companies, especially small companies, to do this. You know, they're going to have to space, or it's suggesting that they should space out 2 meters between where one person sits and the next, put screens up. There's also talk that if you sit on a sort of pod where you're facing somebody, that will be advised against. So the person facing you wouldn't, you know, you'd have to also look in the same way or back to back. Obviously, good news if you're facing Barney. That'll teach you to take the mickey out of my knitting club. But all sorts of things like that. And you just think, if you're running any kind of business, to try to implement all of that is just, you know, the survival is the kind of key, the name of the game for many of them. Yeah. Without having to worry about getting the old tape measure out and measuring out. But that's the reality. We are going to be, whether you're in the pub, the beer garden, the park, or whatever, you know, social distancing will be here for probably until there's a vaccine.
Yeah, no, and I think we if you look, we've got about 300 people work from head office. So a couple of different options we've talked about, and if anybody's ever been to a head office in Newcastle, it's open plan, longer rows of desks and what have you. And some of the contingency plans we've looked at is maybe rotating teams every week. So let's say you've got 10 people sat on one table. Week 1, 5 of them will come in within the 2 meter dotted around. The next week, the other 5 will come in, and you can rotate them that way. You know, so that's one plan. The other plan is we just continue to work from home for the foreseeable. And then there's many variables on that plan as well. As you can imagine, having 300 different members of staff of all different ages and backgrounds and what have you. We've got, you know, everyone's got different needs. We've got different people with, you know, underlying health concerns, or who live with people with health concerns, or children and school needs and things. So there's a lot of moving parts within there, and I think it's that's why I don't think we're going to get anything too big bang from Boris on Sunday, or I hope not. You know, where he was big bang the last time at 8:30 when he said, right, you're not going into work tomorrow, and luckily we planned ahead for that. You know, so kind of sent a text out, an email. Everybody already had the laptops at home, and off we went. But I don't think we're going to get told off him on Sunday, back to work the next day. I think it's going to be in a couple of weeks' time. We maybe can start to do a little bit of that. So, you know, for True Potential, we've got the physical options there. We can continue to work business as usual as we have done there. I think that the only reason why me as a kind of a chief executive would want people back to work is more the social side of things and the psychological side of things as well, which I think we've talked about a wee bit before, where it might be nice to go and see your friends and your colleagues in work and have a bit of a laugh. And Peter can share the latest knitting patterns with Barney, and Barney can keep his back to Peter. So it's but it's things like that, you know. It's for those who don't know, Peter sits just near Barney anyway, so there's obviously many silly laughs every day going on, and we miss that, I think, at work. And I think it's good for a health side of things, but maybe if we get this social bubble side of things in, and you're allowed to have a select set of pals or family or what have you, maybe that starts to lessen the blow a little bit.
Is that what's known as the Neil Ferguson approach? A few extra people can come round.
That's
Dan, I think as well, from the working from the office type of thing, you miss out on that when, you know, if you go for a coffee or you just want 5 minutes with someone just to have an idea. You're not going to call your boss every 5 minutes or your colleagues every 5 minutes to go past these ideas. I think you lose a bit of that from working from home.
Yeah. You miss the spontaneous side of business. Yeah. You know, you certainly get a lot done. You know, I wrote a note to clients and to our advisors at the end of last week to kind of tick off the end of April, which was the first full month of lockdown. And it was quite staggering, some of the stuff we got through last month. I was quite surprised, or maybe not surprised. I just thought, that's brilliant what the team at True Potential have done in 4 weeks. You know, that's a heck of a lot of work and some great results in there as well. But yeah, I think we're missing some of the off the cuff sides of things, where it's hard to have a good idea and think, right, now I'll email Peter, I'll email Barney, I'll email Jamie, and we'll find a good time to talk about that, you know. So we can do that at 3:30 today, you know, and off we go. So you do miss that spark a little bit. Jamie, let's just kind of change direction ever so slightly, please. And we've got a couple of different investment/advice questions for you. First one is we've got a client who's it looks like it's from Robert. Robert's asking, how does he change how much he pays into the pension? It doesn't say he wants to put less or more in, but I think he'd be wanting to put more in at the moment, Jamie, of course. But that's not advice, again, before compliance hammer me. It's just
the good news is I can give advice, but no, what I would say with this, Dan, especially with pension contributions, it's always worth, you know, having a chat with your advisor if you don't know how much you've put in your pension to start off with, because there are limits in terms of what you can put in, called annual allowance. So, and that can vary depending on your income. So if you're at the sort of larger end of the scale in terms of income, it's worth having a chat with your advisor before you sort of change any payments, because we wouldn't want any unnecessary tax bills. However, you know, for the majority of clients, adding that extra amount of money in, there's a couple of ways. The way I choose to personally is you can actually set up a direct debit. So you can go onto your website, you can change that direct debit, you can increase it, you can set one up via the site. Or obviously you've got the impulse functionality that you can use via your client website. Majority of clients, if you need any support or help on doing that, you know, you can speak to your advisor or give us a call. So it's available through your advisor, it's available through your website, but either or direct debit or impulse save.
Thanks, Jamie. And linked with that, really, you know, moving from pensions across to ISAs, Jamie, we've got somebody. What's his name? It's David. David's talking about, should he be investing in cash ISAs or stocks and shares ISAs, and what's the broad difference at the moment?
I wonder if that's. I hope that's not David Harrison asking about.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah, because he definitely shouldn't be. But you know, it's interesting. I checked this because back when I first joined True Potential in 2007. When you were investing in a cash ISA, they used to give you that introductory rate. I don't know if you remember that, because it clearly don't happen anymore. But you would get like a 5% or 4% introductory rate, and then after 6 months, 12 months, it would drop to 0.01, which is in terms of a percentage increase. So my view on this, and I would say for clients, it really depends on what your objective and your goal is for that money. So if you've got a long-term objective for that money, so you're saving for, I don't know, for retirement, or you're just saving for a 10 or 15-year plan for your children's school fees, a stocks and shares ISA will get you a better return long term, and history would tell us that. You know, I think for me personally, I think cash ISAs, there's very little benefit to them now. I would also say if you do have cash ISAs and you are wanting to transfer, you can still keep that cash ISA limit. So if you've used your ISA allowance, you can transfer the actual ISA allowance from previous years into a stocks and shares ISA. So quite important. So if you do have a cash ISA, you want to move it, let us know. If you are considering that, I would really think about what your objective is, because if it's long term, you're not going to get the returns that you require from a cash ISA, and potentially lose money actually.
And I think, Jamie, the other thing is as well, as people say a cash ISA has been, you know, traditionally safe. It's not really, and when you look at the reality now, because interest rates are so low, inflation's higher than that. So actually, you're losing money in real time. You know, you're better off investing it, even if you put in an incredibly low risk vehicle, and at least try to get some sort of return on there. So I think, yeah, you're right. You know, traditionally, the old way of thinking, medium and long term investments, stocks and shares ISA, shorter term ISAs, cash ISA type of thing. But I think people really do need to look at the effect of inflation and low interest rates about where they house their money. And again, we can help with that, or your advisor helps with that as well. They can illustrate the two for you. Barney, when it then comes to people investing their money, you know, into either the pension or the ISA, which Jamie's talking about there. Just to bring it into context a little bit, we had a question from Stephen, where Stephen's just asking about how has market events over the last 2 months or so compared, say, to the 2008 financial events, or even way back to the Wall Street crash back in the roaring, or the end of the roaring 20s.
Yeah, I think it's that old quote from Mark Twain: "History doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes." There are similarities, there are differences. I think the big difference this time is the speed of the decline. If we look back to 2008, 2009, in 2007, there were sort of rumblings about something happening in the US subprime market. And I remember going to a seminar in 2007 where somebody was saying, you know, that there is a storm coming and we're preparing for that. But it wasn't until, you know, nearly 2 years later, when our stock market bottomed in March 2009, and even then, the worst of the economic effect was still to come. So it was, it was 2 years or more in the making. This one has happened so much more quickly. If we think back to January, we were looking forward to, a year of reasonable sort of high single-digit growth. There was, the bull market had been going on, but there was no particular reason for it to stop. Then the coronavirus came along in February, middle of February. A few towns in northern Italy were being sort of closed off and locked down. And then by sort of 4 or 5 weeks later, the UK, all of Europe, much of the rest of the world was in lockdown. So the speed of the downturn has been, it's a word that we use a lot, but not without good reason. The speed of the downturn has been unprecedented this time around. It's been very different. Also very different has been the policy response from governments. They knew when the lockdown was deemed inevitable what the economic consequences will be. Not in detail, but they knew that they would be severe. And so we've seen this massive coordinated response from both governments and central banks acting together and around the world. So there's been a coordinated response with the Japanese authorities, the Fed and the US Treasury, the Bank of England and the UK Treasury, the ECB in Europe. So all the monetary authorities are standing by with stimulus and support. They know what the economic effects of this were going to be. They know what they are, and they're standing by to make sure that they are limited as much as possible. So in that respect, it's very different to previous downturns. One of the few benefits of getting older is that, of course, you have seen more of these downturns before. And in terms of similarities, they all feel pretty dreadful when you're going through them. And with hindsight, you always look back and think, do you know what? I wish I'd invested then.
Yeah.
Very true.
Barney, are you getting any? There's a lot of talk I noticed about whether we're in a V or a U in terms of the recovery. Are we going to bounce straight back, or have a bit more, period at the bottom and then a steady climb? Are you hearing anything from the investment managers on their views on that?
I think some are. No one's talking now about an immediate bounce back, and it's obvious that in some respects, things will revert. We're creatures of habit. Things will revert to normal, and in 12, 18 months' time, we'll be looking back on this and thinking, well, it was a bit of an odd time, but things are more or less back to normal now. In other respects, things will never be the same again. There will be an awful lot of people, businesses who, if they weren't flexible enough to work from home, they'll be out of business. True Potential has proved that not only can it, survive, it can thrive during this dislocation. So, that there will be winners and losers, and, some things will revert back to normal. Other things will be forever different for some people. In terms of the economic recovery, I think a V-shaped would be very optimistic. A U-shaped of some sort is probably more likely. But I keep coming back to these enormous levels of stimulus and government support. And Rishi Sunak is not a career politician who's ended up as Chancellor of the Exchequer. He has a background in finance. He's an incredibly well-educated and intelligent individual, which, in the context of politicians is something of a rarity. And I think he's so far he's handled it very well. And so speaking to our managers, they are looking forward to the second half. That the economic numbers that are coming through from the first quarter are horrible.
Yeah,
the worst on record. They don't really matter now. That's old news. No one's really looking at those numbers. Second half will be a good indication, and people are looking out to next year. So I would hope that it would be a U with a short bottom.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the Chancellor there, Barney, because there's a different school of thought as well that he's effectively had to do three. I think I said on the last time on the podcast that I was on, he's effectively done three mini budgets in March to announce more stimulus, more stimulus, more stimulus. That's him reacting and the government reacting as a situation changes. But the one thing you can definitely say looking back is that policies made quickly and in haste, even if you say, well, that's what the situation demanded, they rarely turn out to be. It's never the best way to make policy. And of course, they're ploughing huge amounts of money into this furloughing scheme. I read, I think, 40 billion by the end of the 3 months that it was initially set aside for. That's by the way, the size of the entire defence budget for a year will have been ploughed in 3 months into this scheme. So you just wonder whether those companies that are on life support and using that now, do they re-emerge? I mean, he's not going to stop it in a flash. It'll be a gradual, might go to 60% of what, and so on and so forth. But you just wonder, what's going to happen when he pulls that plug. Is it getting back to normal, or do those companies go under anyway? And are we heading for unemployment, on a much bigger scale? So we don't know.
I wonder if there needs to be some sort of quantitative furloughing easing type, for a brand new scheme where they've got to start to phase the furloughing down as companies come back to work, because there'll be certain manufacturers and other organisations who've probably got no pipeline of business at the moment, so they're effectively going to have to open up again. And we talked about restaurants last week as well, where restaurants were hoping for the lockdown to stay a lot longer until people were more comfortable with relaxing social distancing, full stop. Because I think they've been hinting at, well, if furlough and support is switched off now and we open the restaurants back up, we'll probably have one man and not a dog, unless it's a guide dog, because dogs aren't allowed in restaurants, but like one man and his guide dog coming in, and that's it. Whereas you've got a team of chefs, a team of waitresses and everything ready to go. So I think there's some of that. I think also the other effect of furlough, and it's going to be strange for a lot of people. Imagine if you haven't worked for 2 or 3 or 4 months as well. You're an employee who's on furlough and you come back to work. It's going to be odd. I think it's going to take a bit of time for those who are furloughed to get kind of back up to work and speed as well. And I think it was either last week or the week before, again on a podcast, we talked about how, although we're driven to distraction at times working from home and, either fighting our wives or our husbands or the children or whatever, and sharing the internet and like we all have to do, but at least we're kept busy versus kind of, it must be hard if you're furloughed at the moment and it's 12 hours, 13, 14 hours of being awake, of doing nothing. It's pretty fun for a week or so, and then not as much. So strange. I think talking about how we've been keeping busy as well. I think mindful of time, but I'm also mindful we've cracked through a lot of our viewers' questions there. So I just want to talk a bit about some other true potential side of things. And really, one of the ways we've been keeping our own staff busy is we've been having regular. We have a weekly work from home webinar, which is a bit of fun within there, where it's about half an hour. We have a roundup of the business, but also we have a roundup from different departments and different staff talking about how they're adapting working from home. And Jamie, you're the host of that, so you come up with some strange suggestions as well. But the less said about that, the better. But one of the other ways we've been keeping busy as well is in terms of our charity work. And delighted to say, as of the end of last week, the staff raised £5,000 for St Cuthbert's Hospice. St Cuthbert's Hospice are a local Durham-based hospice, so supplying some really critical work. And as you could guess, causes like that at the minute are really under stress and strain. You know, they typically fundraise via shops and other donations, all of which are closed at the moment. So that £5,000 is paid for more than 2 full days of patient care as well. So a real well done to the True Potential staff for raising that much money. And how did they raise that? This is another way we've kept everybody busy. They had a week of challenges set by Esther. Esther Esther runs the office for us, so she came up with these challenges. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind just humouring us and just watching a couple of minutes of the Work From Home Challenge highlights reel.
Good afternoon everyone, George Bell here, just taking part in the 5 mile indoor challenge. Got the Fitbit on to keep count. I hope everybody's keeping well and keeping safe, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Okay, I'm bored in the house and I'm in the house bored.
What more to go? Fluffy bunny. 10.
Fluffy one.
10.
Thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. It was certainly great fun watching it. I didn't personally participate because I'm a boring sod, for want of a better term. but I pretended it because I was too busy with meetings and things like that. But I hadn't seen that video until it was actually made live by Esther and by Graham, who puts together our videos, and I loved watching it. I actually sent it to my family. I had a right good laugh doing it. Barney, I know that you were pulled into the mix. You did the question challenge, is that right?
I did the 20 questions, and I'm never going to look at the poor contestants on Mastermind in the same light again, because some of the questions I got were easy and I knew the answers, but they just did not come. And I mean, one of them was who played Neo in the Matrix, and it's Keanu Reeves. Everybody knows that. Could I think of Keanu Reeves? Could I not? And there were some other ones. I came off thinking, I don't know, I'm not allowed to swear here. Otherwise, I would. But I thought, Barney, you've been a complete burk in that, in terms of some of the answers that you've given, or some of the things that you couldn't remember. So it's sort of quite instructive, and I'm going to be far more forgiving for some of the idiots who turn up on Mastermind and fail to get any questions right.
Just for Barney, for anyone who didn't see it, you better tell us, what did you get out of 20?
I don't know. Esther wouldn't tell me. And I've been too afraid to ask.
You didn't win, Barney. We all know that one.
No, I didn't win. No.
Oh dear. Well, if it helps, Barney, you seem to have answered today's questions well.
Thanks, Dan.
Unless you just made the answers up. So it's well, hopefully not. And that's so and well done to the True Potential team, and thank you everyone for chipping in. And I know that St Cuthbert's were really over the moon with nice potential. I know it's not about me having a nice feeling, but I was proud of the team and the work they put in and the money they donated. And talking about being proud as well, Peter linked in with our C19 Business Pledge and our Unisolated campaign. We've been busy delivering over the last week or so.
Yes, absolutely. Working with our financial advisors all over the country as well. They've been good. They've mucked in. We've delivered over £5,000 worth of food packages to some of the most vulnerable clients all over the country, which is a great thing actually. And that we had some lovely feedback. I mean, some of the clients, they've all been sending in photographs of them with their packages, but some really lovely feedback just to say it's just what I needed, because we almost timed it just so that it would arrive just as we're a few weeks into the lockdown and people are beginning to perhaps get a bit concerned about running out of stuff, and if you can't get down to the shops and all the rest of it. So we sent that out. I think it was a great idea, and it's been very, very well received. So that, on the back of the hospice you mentioned, and of course at the very start of the lockdown we supported another hospice in Northumberland as well. So I think it's also worth saying, Dan, that we kind of do this all year round. This is stuff that we do anyway throughout the year with the staff, supporting causes and good causes across the country. And what we've done in the lockdown period and this period is really just kind of dialed that up. But I think what I'm certainly proud of is the fact that we're doing that all year round. And I think it's just been even more impactful during this period. On the C19 pledge, by the way, quick update on that for you as well, as people who've listened before will know, this is something which David Harrison set up back in March as the country was getting to grips with this. And the idea was to encourage all sorts of companies to play their part, basically, by looking after their employees, looking after their customers, and looking after their community with some of the things we've just been discussing. And huge numbers of companies getting behind it, all doing their own different thing. I think the latest is about 300 companies now are signed up, huge names. International names, by the way, as well. Notes not just limited to the UK, and about 3 million employees. About 10% of the entire workforce are working for companies that have signed up to this pledge. That True Potential was the first to sign up, and David came up with the idea. So I think in that respect, I think we've done a great job. Yeah.
No, I think so, and you're right, Peter. We're an esteemed company with the C19 Business Pledge side of things. And I think if anybody wants to find out more, they can search for that on Facebook. They can also search for our Unisolated work as well, which is a network that we've created on Facebook, really provide a bit of people who've been locked down and are feeling isolated there. And certainly I hope, certainly the food hamper was something again which created a really nice feeling looking at those photos coming in, Peter, and hopefully Graham managed to pop a couple of those images in as you were speaking earlier there. It was great.
Be worth, Dan, sorry to interrupt. Barney should have a go at the Unisolated page, because David Harrison's got a little knack of asking a few quiz questions on a Monday and a Friday on there. So Barney, have a go at those. You never know. Might have better luck. Yeah, just if in doubt, just answer with Keanu Reeves. You'll not go far wrong.
Anything to help me improve.
You're in the swing of it now, Barney. It's easy now. Easy. So I think, gentlemen, thank you for today. I think that we've covered a lot of ground there. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for all of the questions. So obviously we're presenting today. It's Thursday because we've got a bank holiday tomorrow. We're celebrating VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, 75 years tomorrow. Jamie, do you have any plans for tomorrow? Are you having a sing along in the street?
Apparently we are. Annie, my wife's got the flags already purchased, so the flags are going out. And apparently there's going to be a picnic on the front garden, so I've been told. So I think could be fun. I think there's a timetable on the BBC of what you've got to do.
I've seen that, yeah.
And I've got a great voice, so I might as well sing, Dan, as well.
You might as well sing along. Is it Dame Vera Lynn? Is that who it is?
I think so, yeah.
Peter, are you doing a sponsored knit-a-thon on the drive for tomorrow?
Well, I won't have time because I'll be too busy firing up the barbecue. I think the weather's going to be okay, but I've decided that I don't care what the weather's like. If I've got to have it under an umbrella, I'm going to have me barbecue tomorrow. Yeah. I'm going to get in the garden, have a proper a banger and a burger, and put a little Union Jack in the top. I've been with the kids colouring in bunting to hang around the garden and the house, and we've got a flag. We've made a mock-up Buckingham Palace. So we've had a proper week of like British festivities in this house, and I'm looking forward to I'm totally confused, by the way, because 7 weeks of lockdown, then you get a bank holiday, which always makes you think it's Wednesday when it's really Thursday, and then they've switched it to a Friday. So I've no idea what year it is, let alone what day of the week it is.
I think it's 2029, Peter. I think is
Good.
where we are. Yeah.
As long as I'm still the same age as I was when it was 2020, I don't mind that.
Well, I'd like to think we'd all come out as looking younger and healthier, but I'm not sure. And Barney, how about up in rural Northumberland? What's the plans up there, up your way?
Well, Peter was talking about going into the garden furniture business earlier, and that's what I'm doing. Anyone who's had any sort of building work done over the years knows that whatever the building work you're having done is, there's loads of timber left over at the end of it. So I've got an outhouse full of old bits of timber, and I'm making that into a big outside table to sit on the terrace outside. I've done a bit, and as all these jobs do, they always take longer than you think they're going to take. But the crowning glory, it should all hopefully get put together this weekend. So it's made up of old scaffolding planks, and the legs are big sort of roof beams that were taken out of when we had the extension done. So it's all sort of thick and chunky and designed to be outside, a bit like the fella who's building it.
Barney, like every good building project, is it 3 months late?
It's I was going to try and have it done for my wife's birthday, because little does she know, but that's her present. But actually, her birthday was last week, so it is a week overdue. But as with all things, the best things in life are worth waiting for.
They are. They certainly are. And once you've finished that, Barney, the other thing I've noticed people make is they're making little planters and what have you from pallets lying around the house as well. So there's quite a lot of, if you have a look on the internet about projects with pallets, that'll keep you busy once this table's made as well. So lots to do. And I think for me, we're getting my wife loves afternoon tea and things like that, and she loves buying things, actually, to be honest with you. So Gemma has noticed there's a company in Bladen type of way called Buckleberries, who tend to be a dairy and other such things, and they're doing VE afternoon teas. So that's today's delivery at the house, and that's tomorrow's party tea sorted. Although she did mention that it doesn't come with sandwiches, it's just cakes. So it could be okay, but the problem is I prefer cakes, and I prefer sandwiches and pies and sausage rolls rather than cakes. So that's it. Plan B needed, I think. So that's about as exciting as my weekend's going to be, gents. So good. Well, hopefully, everybody, hopefully you enjoyed today, and hopefully you're going to have a super day tomorrow, be it having a barbecue under an umbrella, be it singing on the driveway, or be it doing extensive building projects, or whatever else you choose, ladies and gentlemen. But have a lovely weekend. I hope you enjoyed today, and very much looking forward to speaking to you next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.